In today's video, I'm going to share how I learned to think and speak in another language without translating from my native language. It starts with the understanding part, and then there is some period of time for memory retention, and then what's called a second language brain emerges, and then I grow it. I'm a native Japanese speaker, and I learned to speak English and a little bit of Chinese both in the same way. So in this video, I'm going to dig deeper in each stage to share the methods I practiced over the years. All of them are simple enough for everyone to do as well. Okay, let's first clarify what's happening in our brain when we use our native language, translate, and directly use another language. When we use our native language, first we have this non-linguistic thing in our head. This can be many types of things like our thoughts, feelings, experience, memory, and so on. The important thing is this is not linguistic, and we transform this non-linguistic thing into our native language. We probably do this too fast to notice in our native language, but I believe we surely do this. So this is what happens when we use our native language. Now, we are learning a new language, and when we feel we're translating in our head, we're doing this process. We are translating from our native to another language. But this translation is really exhausting. Even professional interpreters, when they do their job, say in a big conference or something, there are a few of them and they take turns in 20 minutes or something because translation is exhausting and requires intense focus. So what I ultimately want to do is to use the new language directly, which is from here to here. At this point, you may notice this is the same as the native language, which I think is correct. When somebody is speaking a foreign language fluently, they're not translating fast, they use it in the same way they use their native language. Alright, I just wanted to clarify these three things because it's really important to recognize explicitly. Now let's get into actual how-tos. The first stage for me is about understanding in the target language. I'll be sharing 5 things here. The first and the easiest thing I do is visualization. This is very simple. I visualize some simple words like these. This is 面包 and this is 粥 in Chinese. Not bread or to punch. When I hear the word 面包, I imagine this picture, and when I see this kind of object, I say 面包. This way there is no space that other languages come in, right? Sometimes I do use a dictionary to know the translation, but what I'm essentially doing is not knowing the translation itself. I'm making sure the bread leads to this, and 面包 leads to this, the same object. So I learn new words in the target language, and this eventually allows me to go the other way around and use it directly. On the contrary, if I learn the target language by translation, I'll be stuck in this translating path. Let's take a look at how it should work. I have this image in my head, it's pan in my native language, but instead of translating, it goes bread in English, and it's 面包 in Chinese. Or in the case of the second word, I imagine this, and it's naguru in my native language, and it's to punch in English, and 粥 in Chinese, not doing the translation. So this visualization can be applied to any words as long as we can easily imagine what they look like or how they move like. Then what if we can't visualize? In that case, I'd understand from context. Here's the word ganga, which means awkward in English and kimazui in Japanese. Now let's say you're trying to explain this word to someone who doesn't know what it means. How do you explain? We can't visualize it, it's hard to describe the definition. I think the easiest way is to use examples or context. So here's one example of ganga. This woman has a boyfriend. Well, he's actually a fake boyfriend. And for the first time, he's visiting her family on Chinese New Year's Day to have dinner with them. But his father was not expecting him to come, so the conversation between these two men was really ganga. Now, I think you know what it is, and you can also use it in the right context, right? So even if we can't visualize the words, we can still acquire them without translation by taking advantage of context. If I'm positive that I know what the word is like and how to use it in the right context, that's also when I'm not using my native language. And in this case, ganga is a type of feeling, so I additionally do what I call feeling matching. Let me explain. Ganga was a new word for me, but the feeling I get from this word, which is non-linguistic, should be the same as what I get from awkward or kimazui, which I already have. So I make sure the feeling I get is the same whether it's from Chinese or English or Japanese. I don't know what's this called, but I just named it feeling matching. So this is what it is. The reason why I do this is because ultimately I want to do the other way around. Like when I feel this feeling, that's kimazui in Japanese and awkward in English and ganga in Chinese. This way I'm not translating between the languages, I'm just simply describing my feeling in whatever language I'm using at the moment. So when the word can't be visualized, I use context and I do feeling matching to understand in the target language. Now let's move on to grammar. I think grammar is pretty simple. I just pay attention to its function, which is pretty much what grammar is. For example, when I see the word in way, this could be translated into a word like because, but what I pay attention to instead is its function. In way just describes the reason. 因为有空，所以出门. This one goes like, because I have time, so I'm going out. But this translation is not what I do in my head. The way I see this sentence is 有空 is a reason, and as a result, this person does 出门. So this kind of grammatical structure or function is what I need to know, not the exact translation. If you're learning Japanese, it's still the same. 時間があるので出かけます. When you see ので, this part 時間がある is a reason to do 出かけます. So this ので doesn't need to be translated into a word like because what I essentially need to know is just its function. Another example. I'm not gonna translate the whole sentence, but this 不是 is like is not in English, and when this 并 is added in front, this sentence becomes strongly negative. This is the function that I need to know. I could translate and explain the difference in English, like not becomes never to stress the negative meaning, or in Japanese, 何々ではない becomes 決して何々ではない. But this translation is not what I need to know. Again, what I get from this 並 is it's just function. It strongly negates the following part in the negative sentence. So when it comes to grammar, paying attention to its function is a way to avoid a translation for me. Now let's move on to sentences. Words and grammar make up sentences, so all I need to do is just to combine what I have shared so far. So I'll be sharing what happens next, which is I start paying attention to the message of a sentence. This can be a good example. 请问 works as a polite word in a question sentence. 怎么 is like how. 称呼 is a polite version of to call. 你 is you. With these clues, I only pay attention to the message. In this case, if somebody says this to me, that person is just politely asking my name. So my response would be 叫我 Nate 就可以了. Just call me Nate. So we communicate without translating the whole sentence. I feel this is what we do in our native language as well. It's not every single word that we are paying attention to. We're just trying to understand the point of what the person is trying to say, that is, the message. This is not something I can do from the beginning, but as we get used to understanding only in the target language, our language proficiency would eventually reach this level. As a recap of stage 1, let me show how I do all of these things on the learning materials that I actually use. I like learning from video content, so I'll be using one of the vlogs on this channel, Grace Mandarin Chinese. So the first one is 泡咖啡. Cafe is coffee. So my question is, what is she doing with this coffee? But don't answer it. She's doing 泡咖啡. So this is 泡咖啡. 我 is a first person subject. The next word is 每天, and if I look up this word in a dictionary, that would be everyday. But instead of saying everyday in my head, I will imagine a calendar, and 每天 is like this, right? This is 每天. The next word is 早上, and earlier in this video there was a clock that says 8 o'clock in the morning. So 8 o'clock in the morning is one of 早上. The next word is 一定会. 一定会 is about a probability, and it's a high probability. And in this case, this probability is as close to as every day. So it's probably about 9 days out of 10 days. The next word is 喝. This is a verb. What do you think she would do with this coffee? She's gonna do this, right? So this is 喝. The next word is 一杯. 一杯 is this. 一杯, 两杯. So 一杯 is this. I'm just counting the quantity, right? Now the next one is 不然. It's kind of hard to describe, but it's like hypothetically negate the previous sentence. I'm going to translate for you, but in the previous sentence, she said she drinks coffee almost every day in the morning. So 不然 means if I don't. The next word 觉得 is to think. It's one of the basic words. The next one is 自己. For me, 自己 is here. For her, 自己 is there. Right, 自己. For me, 自己 is here. The next word, 好像. This is about ambiguity. The next one is 没睡醒. Let's put it this way. You're addicted to coffee and you wake up in the morning, but there's no coffee. How would you feel? That's 没睡醒. The next chunk is 加一些牛奶. 牛奶 is what she's holding right now. Right, you can see it, right? 一些 is an amount, and we look at this, and this is how much 一些 is. 加 is a verb, so what she's doing with this 牛奶 is 加. The next chunk is 我比较喜欢喝拿铁. 比较 is an outer verb, and I'll come back here later. 喜欢 is to like, it's one of the basic words. 喝 is something we already did. This is 喝. Now, what is 拿铁? There is coffee with milk. That's what she says 拿铁 is. Now, let's go back to 比较. 比较 is an outer verb, and its direct translation is relatively. And what does it mean here? So there are several types of coffee, and she likes 拿铁 compared to other types, right? So that's what 比较 is in this context. So I try to understand the target language as it is like this. I want to avoid a translation from my native language. So all I do is for making direct connections with the target language. To do so, I take advantage of visualization, context, what I call feeling matching, grammar functions, and sentence messages. Now we are going to stage 2. In a nutshell, what I do in this stage is to shift my memory from the short-term to the long-term storage. We memorize things and forget them, and remember them again and forget them again. By repeating this, some of the important memories gradually shifts to what's called the long-term storage. And once the memory gets stored in this long-term storage, it firmly sticks. Same thing happens on language acquisition. Let's say I just learned this is called a mug, so I just made a connection with this image and the word. Now when I try to say it's a mug, it kind of takes time to remember it, or I could even forget because the memory first gets stored in the short-term storage. On the other hand, when this memory is in the long-term storage, the moment I see this, it's a mug. It feels like this word is part of my body, part of my native language, and I won't easily forget. So what I want to do in stage 2 is to shift as many memories or these connections as possible to the long-term storage. I have 2 ways to do this. One is to recall what I have already learned, and another is to keep consuming a lot more learning materials. They both make sense. When I review what I already learned, I can save time and quickly remember what I forget. But the problem is it's not always fun to keep watching the same thing over and over again. When I watch new videos to learn, I can keep myself entertained and also in contact with frequently used vocabulary as well. I do both depending on how I feel on the day. As the new language gets piled up in my long-term memory, I start thinking in this new language, and in some situations, this is what I feel the emergence of what's called a second language brain. This name is kind of confusing, but with this brain, I think in the target language, and what I can think is also what I can speak. So stage 2 is really simple. I keep learning new things and keep reviewing what I have learned to get the new language stored in the long-term memory. Now, once I feel I'm having a second language brain, for the rest of my language learning journey, all I need to do is just to grow it, which leads to stage 3. Okay, let's finally face how to think more in the target language. To make it clearer, stage 1 and 2 was mainly about understanding, which is input, this direction. Now, stage 3 is more about going this way, output. To be able to think in the target language, I try to think in the target language. Okay, it doesn't sound like it makes sense, so let me explain. When I try to think in the target language, I still fail in most cases because my second language brain is not mature enough. So I'd mostly be like, oh, how do I say this in Chinese? And then turn to ChatGPT, Google Translation or whatever, and get to the answer. It kind of looks like I'm just using translation, but the biggest difference is this answer sounds familiar, because by the time I get to stage 3, I've taken an enormous amount of input. So when a translation gives me a correct expression of what I want to say, it feels like, okay, that makes sense. I knew it. I've heard it before. Why didn't I come up with that? It gives me that kind of feeling. And this aha moment connects my brain and the target language in this direction. And this connecting process takes place fast because stage 1 and 2 lay the solid foundation of the target language. So every time ChatGPT or Google Translation tells me how to say this or that in the target language, I feel like, okay, I got it. Okay, that makes sense. And many things I've learned start making sense and getting organized in my head. And this way I get to think more and more in the target language. If you like to journal, or if you're brave enough to actually start talking with somebody, that's also count as output. It's just my preference that I like to practice by myself first. If it's a hassle to think of what to say or write, my second option for the output practice is to read a script of my favorite YouTube videos or Netflix series. This way I don't need to think of what to say from scratch. But still, I can practice putting my thoughts or feelings directly into the target language because I already know the storyline. So simply saying again, in stage 3, to finally be able to think more and more in the target language, I grow my second language brain by trying to think in the target language, which makes sense and it works thanks to the enormous amount of input in stage 1 and 2. And what I can think is also what I can speak. Let me quickly recap the whole video. To be able to think and speak in the target language without translating from a native language, my strategy is simple. I do the same both in English and Chinese. First, I keep understanding in the target language. To do so, I take advantage of visualization, context, what I call feeling matching, grammar functions, and sentence messages. The purpose is to create this path between the target language and this non-linguistic thing that we all have. By creating this path, I won't have to take this translating path. Second, I need some time so my memories get shipped to the long-term storage and eventually a second language brain emerges. Lastly, I grow my second language brain by gradually shifting my efforts from input to output. This works because stage 1 and 2 lay the solid foundation of the target language. Alright, that's all I have for today. To be really honest, I do everything I shared in this video just intuitively, so it wasn't easy to put it into actual words and images. So if there is any part where I'm not making myself understood well, please feel free to leave comments. I'll try my best answering them. If you found this video helpful, please be sure to hit the like and subscribe button, and see you next time. Thanks for watching.